I cannot really see doubt that if that were put to them in a convincing manner, they would see it. It is not a very difficult thing to see, and I cannot help thinking they have enough intelligence to see it, provided it is separated from politics and from competition. There is, as everybody repeats, an attitude of suspicion. That attitude of suspicion can only be got over by complete and utter frankness, by stating, there are these things which we consider vital, but on other points we are quite willing that you should stand up for the things you consider vital. If there is any point on which we clash, which we both consider vital, let us try to find a compromise, rather than that each side should annihilate the other, which would not be for the good of anybody. I cannot help thinking that if that were put in a perfectly frank and unpolitical manner to the Russians, they would be as capable of seeing it as we are. At least I hope so. I think one could make some use of the scientists in this matter. They themselves are extremely uneasy, with a very bad conscience about what they have done. They know they had to do it, but they do not like it. They would be very thankful if some task could be assigned to them which would somewhat mitigate the disaster that threatens mankind. I think they might be perhaps better able to persuade the Russians than those of us who are more in the game. They could, at any rate, confer with Russian scientists and perhaps get an entry that way towards genuine cooperation. We have, I think, some time ahead of us. The world at the moment is in a war-weary mood, and I do not think it is unduly optimistic to suppose that there will not be a great war within the next 10 years. Therefore, we have some time during which we can generate the necessary genuine mutual understanding. There is one difficulty that I think is not always sufficiently understood on our side, and that is that the Russians always feel, and feel as it appears rightly, that in any conflict of interests there will be Russians on one side and everybody else on the other. They felt that over the Big Three versus the Big Five question. It was Russia on one side and either 2 or 4 on the other. When people have that feeling, you have, I suppose, to be somewhat tender in bargaining with them, and certainly not expect them to submit to a majority. You cannot expect that when they feel that it is themselves against the field. There will no doubt have to be a good deal of tact employed during the coming years to bring about continuing international cooperation. I do not see any advantage in the proposal which is before the world of making the United Nations the repository. I do not think that there is very much hope in that, because the United Nations, at any rate at present, are not a strong military body capable of waging war against a great power, and whoever is ultimately to be the possessor of the atomic bomb will have to be strong enough to fight a great power. Until you can create an international organization of that sort, you will not be secure. I do not think that there is any use whatever in paper prohibitions, either of the use or of the manufacture of bombs, because you cannot enforce them, and the penalty for obeying such a prohibition is greater than the penalty for infringing it, if you are really thinking of war. I do not think, therefore, that these paper arrangements have any force in them at all. You have first to create the will to have international control over this weapon, and when that exists, it will be easy to manufacture the machinery. Moreover, once that machinery exists, once you have an international body which is strong and which is the sole repository of the use of atomic energy, that will be a self-perpetuating system. It will really prevent great wars. Habits of political action will grow up about it, and we may seriously hope that war will disappear from the world. That is, of course, a very large order, but this is what we have to face. Either war stops, or else the whole of civilized mankind stops, and you are left with mere remnants, a few people in outlying districts, too unscientific to manufacture these instruments of destruction. The only people who will be too unscientific to do that will be people who have lost all the traditions of civilization, and that is a disaster so grave that I think that all the civilized nations of the world ought to realize it. I think they probably can be brought to realize it before it is too late. At any rate, I most profoundly hope so. End of speech.